Hello and most welcome to Heidegger 1730. We're really progressing with the speed of light here. Supersonic speed going into the text. And this text has great relevance to the former text we read, 729 by Timothy Beale. The revelation, and we spoke about Joachim and his connected description and depiction of this greater understanding, larger understanding that takes in all facets of reality, but does not take away any of its details or its accuracies or its relevance or truth. And this is to be compared with the modern way of doing knowledge, which is isolate, look for the original, having. Yeah, very good, Akal. Stop there. Fantastic. Pictures are not coherently empirically false. They're simply misleading. Rather at root, to be in the grip of the picture is to be attracted to certain distorting analogies, which, when coupled with certain other explanatory ambitions, fosters confusion. There is, so to speak, there is no way of getting out of this without the therapy of philosophy. And I remember the desperation when I started, well, I was into my study at the university quite a lot, all those, and I was a student of complained that he just felt confused. Just masses of different things piled upon without any coherent understanding. Bits and pieces like a package of muesli, that German breakfast cereal. And the reason for that is the prevailing picture that takes away all stability, and it leads to the double evil of relativism and absolutism, which is actually the same thing. And here we have a very nice list mentioned by Horridge of how things can go awry, and that we will get stranded in different positions of this, where we try to scientism, which is the stage we're at now, I think. This is the idea that a simple a priori principle awaits discovery. Today, if you study science, it would be taught in a way that there are a priori rules for how reality develops. There are rather engineers than scientists. And there are also rules for the discovery of those a priori principles of reality. So everything is from the very beginning fixed. There is absolutely well, there's very little freedom, if anything. And I would say all academia has adapted to this. Truth is out there. It's already in place. We do not have to do anything. It will just seep into our minds. Absolutely false, but inevitable solution, since we don't have the theory of philosophy, which we are now presenting. And continue on page 5. Start from the top. First paragraph. Take it from the start. Wittgenstein's signature notions of language games and form of life are meant to bring into prominence that there is no way of understanding our psychology from a theoretical or outsider perspective. There is no getting behind, beneath, or above a form of life for the philosophical purpose of providing a more illuminating explanation or justification of it. Now we have the prevalent model of the codec. There is no other one. Mostly, for most of the time, there's no other one available. Philosophers go wrong in attempting to theorize and explain what lies at the base of all our activities. In place of these misguided attempts, the best we can do is to be vigilant of transgressions of sense, occasion by occasion, without the aid of general rules that can be independently confirmed. Wittgenstein realized that what is fundamental to our practices is something that can only make it itself manifest in and through the practices and activities in which we engage. Hence, he holds, we must resist holding out hope for a further explication of the nature of our form of life in the form of a philosophical theory that somehow reveals what lies behind and beneath and explains our practices. Our natural animal responses fund but do not circumscribe the full range of possibilities present in our sophisticated cultural and communal activities. In talking of our form of life, Wittgenstein was not only gesturing at both our basic natural reactions as augmented by our encultured ways of thinking and doing, but also what we say and do is inherently bound up with worldly offerings. Thus, if we imagine the facts otherwise than they are, certain language games lose some of their importance, while others become important. And in this way, there is an alteration, a gradual one, in the use of the vocabulary of a language. The world constrains our practices, but it does, and this is important, it does not determine them. The possibility of change, transformation, and development is ever present. Often we are compelled to adopt new practices and new views as we discover as yet unnoticed aspects of reality. At other times, we have more choice. Nevertheless, while there is a degree of latitude, it is neither that just anything goes, nor that viable developments are ever simply a matter of choice. It is precisely because they are tied to the possibilities afforded by our form of life that changes to our practices are not merely arbitrary. They have a purpose and a point. Wittgenstein's driving insights, which runs through all his writings, is that there is no a priori order to things. Hence, a fortiori, there is no possibility of charting, surveying, or articulating such an order of things. Even so, as he explains, I'm inclined to distinguish between the essential and the inessential in a game too. The game, one would like to say, has not only rules, but also a point. A point is in them. To grasp the point of a language game, we must look not only at its intellectual dimension, we must also understand its point by situating it in surrounding practices and seeing how those practices relate to our basic responses. For example, we can only understand the nature of pain by attending to all of this circumstantial complexity. In bidding us to attend to our use of concepts in these passages, Wittgenstein is also of necessity bidding us to attend to practices that surround them, It is precisely because there are no surveyable rules for the correct use of concepts. No conceptual rules that are fixed a priori, that define the boundaries of the language game. That we are asked to imagine situation in which others that could have been us might use their concepts differently from the way we do, rather than to try to divine the essence of psychological phenomena. This is for the express purpose of getting a better view of grammar, of our own concepts. It is because we lack a perspicuous representation of the working of our grammar, of our concepts, because there are no a priori rules for their use. That Wittgenstein places such great importance on reflecting on the similarities and difference between possible language game and finding and inventing intermediate cases. Thus, the language games are rather set up as objects of comparison, which are meant to throw light on the facts of our language by way not only of similarities, but also of dissimilarities. This is all one can do when traversing the rough and open terrain that make up the landscape of concepts. This is why in 1948, Wittgenstein writes, "Nothing is more important for teaching us to understand the concepts we have than constructing fictitious ones." He makes this point in Settle in his discussion of a quite unusual language game that might have surrounded the concept pain. He conjures up a tribe that employs two different concepts of pain. One is applied where there is visible damage and is linked with tending, pity, and so on. The other is used for stomach ache, for example, and is tied up with mockery of anyone who complains. Accordingly, unless members of this tribe can locate some kind of outer bodily damage, they will not regard the person as experiencing what we would call pain. Their notion of what counts as pain cuts much more finely than would ours. Or as Wittgenstein puts it, they have concepts which cut across ours. He says of them that their more public understanding of pain is different, but related to ours. Hence, to imagine it, we would need to imagine many other connections different. Yet this in turn requires that we imagine many other facts as being different. Not everything, of course, but quite a lot. For example, an indefinite number of other psychological facts and related practices would have to be otherwise if the analogy were to hold in just the way stated. Although we cannot conceive of an exact list of which changes would be necessary, this can be seen straight away if we only consider that in making such a list we could either start, on the one hand, by imagining our reactions to pain to be quite different, or on the other, by imagining our reactions to other phenomena, such as warmth, as being quite different. A move in either of these directions would also have the ripple effect of making a great number of other connections and associations and activities live or die. To make such shifts an entirely different range of analogies would become appropriate or cease to be so. It is not possible to chart all such changes, which is why Wittgenstein only ever asks us to imagine localized language games in restricted contexts. Although it seems we can do this at a stretch, given the differences in our practices, it is only ever an exercise in imagination. To make genuine sense of these activities. Would require the full picture, a complete sketch of this other form of life. This is beyond us. Nor are we not being asked to seriously imagine är impossible, an alien form of life, Rather, the imagined scenario is being used as a device to get us to reflect on the complexity of our own practice by way of comparison. And to recognize that it characterizes an aspect of our form of life. In this way, imagining language games aids in the removal of the false pictures we may have developed about, say, the essential nature of pain or thought. Getting us to picture alternative language games serves as a dialectical tool. It is with this end in mind, shorn of theoretical and explanatory ambitions, that Wittgenstein directs us to let the use of words teach you their meaning. The point is that, crucially, one cannot guess how a word functions. One has to look at its use and learn from that. It is against this backdrop that we should understand Wittgenstein's famous remark that for a large class of cases, not for all, in which we employ the word meaning, it can be employed thus. The meaning of the word is its use in language. We must be very careful in understanding what it is that Wittgenstein is trying to get us to attend to and describe in such cases. In advocating descriptions instead of explanation, Wittgenstein is in no way suggesting that the descriptions are simply an alternative means of getting at the same target of concern to philosophical theorists. Rather, he asks us to rethink the very nature and purposes of philosophical enterprise. Understood in this light, it would be wrong to think Wittgenstein was seeking to identify general criteria by which to provide complete descriptions of psychological phenomena. Rather, his philosophical investigations should be understood as pursuing the aim of getting a clear view of something we know when no one asks us, but no longer know when we are supposed to give an account of it. For it is only this that is something we need to remind ourselves of. In saying this, Wittgenstein is not advocating a single method of clarification or striving after completeness or comprehensiveness. In sum, to understand Wittgenstein's general philosophical approach is to recognize that our linguo-conceptual practices and the base of a priori commitments associated with them are extremely messy. For the most part, these practices evolve not for the sake of helping us to understand the world, but serve a variety of more humdrum practical purposes, and to serve them in a way that conduces to the complex contingencies of our nature. Our culture and our environment. So we should not be surprised to find, as we do find, that it is no easy matter to provide examples of ordinary notions governed by simple commitments. For these reasons, in general, our concepts, and especially our psychological concepts, are ineradicably messy. Their usage isn't nicely systematizable, contravening the philosophical craving and demand for simplicity. Wittgenstein enjoins us not to attempt to impose an artificial order on our concepts, but to realize that what is rigid should be left rigid. Like the Norwegian coast, I comment. After all, it is not to be expected of this word that it should have a unified employment. We should rather expect the opposite. If we don't think but look, we find that one learns the word think, that is, its use under certain circumstances, which, however, one does not learn to describe. Wittgenstein explicitly tells us of his efforts to explore the possible uses of psychological concepts. That is not of importance to me because I am keen on completeness. Rather because each one casts light on the correct treatment of all. To highlight the point, he considers what success in such an endeavor might look like: a detailed account of the possible circumstances in which we would be it would be appropriate to use the concept think. In describing the possible use of psychological concepts, Wittgenstein is offering up reminders that do not add substantively to knowledge of the world. They do tell his audience anything new. His purpose is clear: not to advance hypotheses with which someone not under the sway of a picture might disagree, or which might be proved true through some kind of empirical test. His descriptions are at best elucidations that could be used to help us to see something that is right before our eyes, yet blocked from view. And here is an excellent place to make a mark and a stop. Excuse me. Sorry. Here. See here, that is in itself a very good place to start. Wittgenstein is not pointing to a beyondness, but our myopia, our inability to find exactly what is in front of our eyes in our doings. And rather, the problem is in our adding to something that is already perfect. Yes, it's the Derridian supplement, but here in the form of a priori rules, so to speak, systems of thinking, where we tell what something is long before it had any chance to develop, and also without us having anything to do with it. It's a distant view. And go to the page we started with some quotes. And the second last paragraph, there is on the third line, or the fifth line from the very bottom. I'm inclined to distinguish between the essential and the inessential in a game too. The game, one would like to say, has not only rules, but also a point. Very, very pertinent. The point disappears in this normal way of thinking, the academia of today. There's never a point, and there is no observance of the substance or the good things in different concepts. It's blocked from view by this a priori take on reality, that we think that the world must develop exactly as it has always done. Cosmological fallacy, as you recognize it. And all that is new is coming from the old. That would be of the Bono. That hides understanding, and it also hides the very important task for our human beings to understand what the word really means, its use. We lose the meaning of the words. They become just nonsensical, empty signifiers. We cannot enter them anymore. And a pointer here is also next page. The end of the second paragraph. The language games are rather set up as objects of comparison, which are meant to throw light on the facts of our language by way of not only similarities, but also of dissimilarities. In a former lecture, we took up this as difference in the revelation in the making of Joachim Fiorini. He had a keen understanding of that. An enormity of complexity that is ignored by the myopia, not seeing what is in front of us. We do not understand ourselves how we use language. Instead, we generalize, kill off the meaning of the words, the concepts. Our sentences come to sound hollow, echoing. This is the antidote. It's returning to ourselves to ground us. There was also a ruggedness mentioned here, rugged, if I can find it, that concepts are rugged. No, with a U. Oh, ragged is ragged. Sorry, I was wrong. What is ragged should be left ragged. And think of this pointedness of the Norwegian coast. That concepts will bear meaning and be good for us, beneficial for us, if they are fractal, like the coast of Norway. When they're not universalized, when there is no a priori take on them, they get massive. And this is no doubt the reason that religious language, philosophical language has disappeared. Because, and this is an exact parallel with the Norwegian coast. If you have an a priori measuring scale on the Norwegian coast on, let's say, 5 kilometers or 10, the raggedness will disappear. That doing will take away all the knowledge of the coast/water. The same is done when we have a priori rules for meaning, or we say all concepts are the same, like they belong to a category, or that grammar can be described or explained. Explanation, the word explanation itself, do no longer work in the modern day. And it's a shame because it's an incredibly important instrument. It's very helpful. Joachim had access to it. We don't. This is the way back. And everything is connected, as we see at the bottom of the same page. The very last quote by Wittgenstein. What happened there? It's supposed to be the same page. My fault. My quote is on page 7. We jumped to ragged, that's true. Let's go to page 7, or our linguo-conceptual practices. Search that. There. Thank you. Sorry about that, listeners in color. Our linguo-conceptual practices and the basic a priori commitment associated with them are extremely messy. For the most part, these practices evolved not for the sake of helping us to understand the world, but to serve as a variety of humdrum practical purposes, and to serve them in a way that conduces to the complex contingencies of our nature, our culture, and our environment. And I stop there, and I'm going to make an example directly. The taking away of liturgy in the 60s by the Vatican Concilium. Those things, liturgy, hymns, singing, ritual, was considered messy, not applying to the universalized rules or a priori structures. And meaning was taken away. It was the idea, in this case, with the Vatican Concilium, in this case, it was the idea that the meaning was hidden in the word, some sort of fixation, obfuscation, and förhanden. And that never uncovers truth, it just covers it by the model of abstraction which is here revealed not to working. Language is, in this case, and I'm using from my own verbiage, my own phrases, a complexity that grows in the things we do, all the things we do, like brushing our teeth, holding a pen, handwriting, manner of walking, how we clean our house, deeply interconnected to all phrases and words in language. And the disaster that happened when liturgy was sort of cut off is the same as cutting the jugular vein in a human being. We all know what happened after it. It was disastrous. But it serves as an example in its all horridness of how everything is interrelated, tangled at every level, every depth. But that doesn't mean it gets low, dirty, and we're not being able to make abstractions. No. We will be able, when we go down to the grits of doing. It's a therapy for language, or for us, is his philosophy. And it just adds to all the things we already have. Kalle, some comments?
Yes, I could comment also on this phrase. And if I want to distinguish between the essential and inessential in a game too, the game, one would like to say, has not only rules but also a point.
Exactly, yeah. Yes.
With the recording.
Oh,
So rules are secondary. They are like that. Sometimes rules can be precise, but often they are vague, and they're secondary to the point, to the meaning.
yes, exactly.
Let me go to another. What we discussed in previous lecture was that there's nothing that is hidden. Let me see if I find hidden. What is hidden is three. What is hidden is of no interest to us. So here I think Wittgenstein is distinguish himself is different from Heidegger. For Heidegger, the things that are hidden, those are relevant. Let me also give another example of this. Let me go to page 7. Page 7, middle of the page 7. Here, middle of page 7. The meaning of a word is its use in language. The meaning of a word is its use in language. Okay, Heidegger would to certain degree agree with this, but he would say that the real meaning of a word is in its etymology. Would you not agree, Hans?
Yes, I would say I would be, I agree with you, I do definitely, but I would say it's more in the direction they have different ways of describing something that is similar. etymology can be also perceived to looking for how a word is, how its proper use is in language, so to speak. Wittgenstein never does historical etymology, and Heidegger does that to find the proper use of ousia, estain, and such things. There can also be some sort of similarities.
Yeah, so Heidegger, Wittgenstein is not interested in the original of the hidden as Heidegger is. So for Wittgenstein, the original is not of interest to us. It is instead it is the game, the meaning of the game, which is relevant. The meaning of the
Yes,
game.
in the whole complexity of everything. I think maybe it could be good to think about that, those wonderful depictions of Joachim. So you see the whole complexity. Everything is present. The diachronic history, the present, the future, the past, all relations in the universe. It's a bit like Carlo Rovelli and his quantum theory of relations. And it does not take away, as we think. This is why we left being, for instance, because we think if we take in everything, we're going to lose distinctiveness and permanence and exactness. No, it's just the opposite. Taking everything in makes it possible to be absolutely specific, exact, precise. Yes, it's hints. Language is definitely messy, but it's a messiness that is part of reality. And I would say there is also where the truth is.
Yes, that's an interesting difference between Wittgenstein. So Wittgenstein, keyword is game. What is the use in every language? By Heidegger, what was the origins? He's more interested in the hidden things and so forth. Wittgenstein is both interested in the ruggedness. So I think there was many gems in today's lecture. Perhaps we should leave it like that.
Yeah. Thank you very much for participating, Kalle Lundahl. And everyone for listening. Have a beautiful day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever and whenever you are. Bye bye for now. Until next, I now stop there.